All right, so we're going to get started. Thank you guys for being here. I apologize. Some of you may have had to go through and set up accounts with your Insight email address, so that might be why people are still trickling in. They're trying to tighten up security a little bit on these Zoom calls, so I'm supposed to enable that. Doesn't mean it's going to happen across the board, but we're giving it a shot to see how it goes today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started with kind of the introduction here. So bear with me. This down. Sorry, I got to get organized here. All right. And one more thing. Okay, so we're going to get started. This is Digital Tools for Architects. It's Archi 136 for the spring of 2022. I'm excited you guys are all here. I can't wait to teach you about Rhino and V-Ray. I think they're incredibly powerful programs, and we're going to create some really great stuff this semester. So as we get started here, I'm going to kind of walk through the introduction. Most of this has to do with the syllabus and kind of how the class is going to be structured. And then we'll get into some actual real work as we go forward today. So first off, my name is Grant Adams. I'm an associate professor of architecture here at Diablo Valley College. I've been doing this since 2007, so about 14 years. I am a part-time faculty, which means that I am here to work with you guys on Monday and Wednesday, but that I have a real job outside of this that I take care of as well. My email is gadams@dvc.edu or grant@digitaltoolsforarchitects.com. You can reach me at either one of those email addresses. Actually, the first one forwards into the second one, so you'll be sure and get me. My phone's there, so you can text me if you need me. And my office hours this semester are going to be before my first class. So I also teach Architecture 135. I think some of you are in that as well. So I teach that class in the morning. So the hour before that, 6:55 to 7:55 a.m. will be the first office hour. And the second office hour will be on Wednesdays after this class, so from 2 to 3 p.m. And of course, those will be conducted via Zoom as well. So a little bit about my background and what have you. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Architecture degree, so a BA in Architecture from UC Berkeley. So most of you are looking at transferring to Berkeley. So things have changed a bit since I was there. That was a long time ago, 2004. But that's where I got my undergraduate degree. That is a 4-year unaccredited, so non-professional degree in architecture. And because of that, if you want to go on to practice architecture, you'll end up getting a Master of Architecture degree, which I also have. That MArch degree was from Berkeley in 2007. So again, a little bit like ancient history, but that's actually when I got the first job to teach here. So right out of grad school, I was a grad student instructor at Berkeley, which is essentially a TA. Really enjoyed teaching. And when I graduated, I kind of stumbled upon DVC and decided to start teaching. And here I am 14 years later. Hard to believe. Anyway, that's a 2-year degree. So it would be 4 + 2 to get your professional degree. It ends up being a 6-year degree. If you went, say, to Cal Poly instead, that's a professional degree. That would be a Bachelor of Architecture degree. And it takes 5 years to complete that. If you wanted to get a master degree on top of that, you would only go for 1 year. So it ends up being 6 years regardless of how you do it. So what do I do on the side? I'm a property manager primarily, and I'm also a general contractor. I have a Class B license, so I do primarily design build work. So I actually do construction. So I do drawings and I do construction, and that's my quote real job. But I'm here teaching you guys for right now. The website for this course, I'm going to kind of hybridize. I use some Canvas and I also use some an additional outside class. The website is digitaltoolsforarchitects.com. Those of you that have been in my class before are certainly familiar with this website. There's actually a fair number of you this semester. If you've never been in one of my classes before, that's okay. It's really easy to pick up on the website, but I use the website to post things, but most importantly, it's to post all the tutorials and videos and helpful things that go along with this class. So that's really what it's about. You will be posting your exercises and assignments on the course website, though I've been toying with the idea of having you guys turn some stuff in via the Canvas site. So that'll evolve as we go forward. But anyway, it's there. We'll go through it in depth a little bit later on in the class. So course schedule. Now, this is probably one of the most important things to kind of talk through, and that is that our course schedule is going to be different than previous semesters. So we're having a live lecture this semester. It'll be on Mondays and Wednesdays from 11 to 12 approximately. And most of the time in this class, it'll be demonstrations. So I'll be sharing my screen and I'll be walking you through certain techniques in Rhino or V-Ray. And so you'll be able to see those live from 11 to 12. I will pre-record some of the lectures, but I'll give you advance notice when that occurs. I also really try to record all the lectures so that you can watch them later on via YouTube. So I'll be recording this lecture and all the rest of them. It takes me a while to process them and get them up on YouTube, so they're not always right away. The good news is all of my previous lectures are still up on the course website. So you'll be able to go back and look at a previous semester, which is awfully close to what we're doing this semester. I have a link there for the digital tool site that has all the lectures for this semester. So you guys will go through that. Now, so that part's the lab part. The other half, and this is very, very different than the previous semesters that I've taught, is that we're setting up the lab differently. I used to have an open lab where anybody could come at any time. Now we're having mandatory lab check-ins each week. So you will be signing up for a time slot. And actually, some of you have already emailed me with your requested time slots. I'm going to do my best to accommodate everybody, but it will be on Monday or on Wednesday in one of these 3 time slots. So they're 30-minute time slots. I'm going to try to have about 5 students in each time slot. So 12:10 to 12:40, 12:50 to 1:20, and 1:30 to 2. Those are all 30-minute chunks. And so if one of those times works better than another, please let me know. I will be taking attendance as part of this course. So you are required to be here. I'll take attendance, and that'll be part of your participation grade for the class. So it's set up very differently than it was before. If you feel like you need some extra help and you want to come to one of the other sessions, that's okay with me. You can piggyback on someone else's session. However, if you do that, I'm going to give priority to the people who are actually in the session first, and then if I have extra time, I'll come and help you. So just be aware that that's how it's going to be set up. So it's a little bit different than previous semesters. So the course description, you guys can read that a little bit later, but essentially we're working on building basic and ultimately intermediate level skills for architecture and how do you represent your ideas using both Rhino and V-Ray. We may touch on a little Photoshop and a little bit of Illustrator, but this class is really not about Photoshop and Illustrator. It's fundamentally about Rhino and V-Ray, and we'll spend all our time working in those 2 programs. So student learning outcomes, I'm required to share these with you so that you know what it is that you're trying to get out of this class. First and foremost, we're going to be creating digital models that explore complex geometries and forms in Rhino 3D. So that's essentially what this class is fundamentally about. We're going to work in these digital models. We're going to explore non-orthogonal shapes. So in SketchUp, you tend to do the basic extruded square and you pull it up and whatever. We're going to get into surfaces that are not like that. Maybe it's topography, maybe it's pillows or curtains. We're going to get through those kinds of pieces of information. We're going to translate the 3-dimensional digital models that we make into patterns for drawing and fabrication. So one of the important things about this class is that it's not just about creating beautiful renderings. It's also about when you've spent the work to create these renderings, how do we also either create models, like physical models through 3D printing or laser cutting, or how do we create 2-dimensional drawings out of those 3-dimensional models? So we're going to work through kind of the translation between the 3-dimensional digital realm and the physical realm of making a model or 3D printing a model, and we'll talk through that. Obviously, in this class, we can't do the laser cutting and we can't do the 3D printing because we're not in person. So I will teach you how to do it, but I won't be able to actually have you do it because we don't have access to the lab the way that this class is set up. As I've told previous semesters, if we get access back, say in the fall, I'll hold a special seminar for all of you guys that didn't see it done physically, and we'll try to go through it at that point. And we're also going to spend a bunch of time learning to render your models, to create materials and to make things look realistic, dealing with camera, light settings, what is it like to have a night rendering, and all those kinds of things. And that is where we'll be using V-Ray primarily. So that brings us to the course software. So you've heard me talk about Rhino or Rhinoceros. That's our primary building block in this class. So we're going to spend a lot of time in Rhino. It is very similar. If you've worked in AutoCAD before, it's very, very similar to the way AutoCAD works. And so if you've worked in AutoCAD, it'll be a fairly natural transition into Rhino. If you haven't worked in AutoCAD, that's okay. We start from the basics anyway. So you'll still get very, very good at Rhino. V-Ray is our rendering software. It's written as a plugin by a different company. V-Ray works, interestingly enough, with Rhino, but it also works with SketchUp or 3D Studio or a variety of other programs. So once you learn V-Ray, it can translate to other 3D modeling programs should you not end up being really happy with Rhino, which of course, I hope you are. We're going to be using primarily the remote desktop or virtual machine at DVC. Some of you have used it last semester. We're going to use it again this semester. It's accessible via a desktop client, which I highly encourage you to install. I'm going to demo this whole thing a little bit later today. I think the desktop client is more stable and it'll get you a little bit better results. Though in the past, I've had students who have been perfectly successful using the web client instead. You can, of course, elect to work on your own computer. Rendering still may be better if you use the lab computers. They tend to be a little bit more powerful than what you have in a laptop. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. There, of course, if you choose to work on your home computer, there are some potential software costs. And so I like to bring those up front. The good news in this class is there's no required textbook, so you're saving on textbooks. So if you have to pay for a software license, it's not the end of the world, but it's something to be aware of. So with Rhinoceros, they have both a Windows and a Mac version. I personally strongly prefer the Windows version, even though I happen to be a Mac person. So I end up using Rhino either through the remote desktop, or if it's my personal copy, I use it through Parallels and I run it that way. So I still use the Windows version, but if you're on the Mac version and you want to work with it, that's okay with me. There is, luckily, a 90-day free trial for new users of Rhino. So if you haven't used it before, you can sign up for a trial. And if you delay starting your trial for about a month and you start it on February 21st, you can get through the end of the semester on the 90-day trial. So that'll save you the $195 student license. If you choose to buy the student license, be aware that it's not a yearly subscription. It's a one-time fee, and you have it in perpetuity afterwards. So sometimes that's advantageous if you feel like you're going to keep using it. I think in the very beginning of this class, most of what you can do is pretty easy through the remote desktop. I haven't had any issues with students using that. Obviously, there's quirks and there's disconnections and there's some frustration in that, but I think they've kind of ironed out some of that. The other piece of the software is V-Ray. V-Ray is Windows only, and it's important for you to know that if you're on a Mac. If you're on a Mac, you're definitely going to end up using the school computers for the rendering portion. Doesn't mean you have to model, because the Rhino file can work back and forth between either the Mac version or the PC version. But if you're going to be doing your rendering, it's going to happen on Windows. It's a $95 per year subscription if you want to have it on your home computer. Like I said, I think relying on the DVC lab computers to do the rendering may be beneficial, because frequently they have more horsepower than you do on a laptop, and they make the renderings a little bit faster. So we'll go through that when it gets a little bit closer, but those are the potential software costs. You guys each, because you're in this class, and maybe some of you are in my 135, so you have it because of that class too, you should each have a license to install the Adobe Creative Suite, which includes Photoshop and Illustrator. We'll touch a tiny bit on the two of them, though not too much. So it's nice to have. It's a nice bonus. If you've taken 135, you know kind of how to use them. If you've never taken 135 and you've never touched these software, don't worry about it. When it gets to that point, I'll help walk you through it, and you won't be left out to dry. Computers. It's important to talk about this as we get into this semester. Obviously, you're going to be working on your own computer. there are some basic requirements that I think are a good idea. Number one, it doesn't matter if you're using a PC or a Mac. I think both are fine. Though, like I said, I prefer the Windows version of Rhino, so it may be slightly better. The way that I will demo will always be using the PC version. So what you see in the lectures and what you see kind of in the live demos is always going to be the Windows version. So be aware of that. I think you need a minimum of 20 to 50 gigs of free space on your hard drive. If you don't have that kind of space, you should invest in one of the little portable hard drives to give yourself a little bit more space. Rhino files can get really big. And so it's important to have that kind of backup storage space. Now, the other thing that's critical is you need a lot of RAM, especially if you're going to do any rendering. Rendering is RAM and graphics card intensive. So the better you have of both of those, the faster the renderings are going to happen. And that's also why I would ask that you consider using the remote desktop for the renderings, because those computers have a lot more RAM and really good graphics cards, so they can speed up the rendering time quite a bit. So I would say 8 gigs is the minimum. 16 is, well, 16 is really the minimum, but I would just consider upgrading your RAM if you don't have 16 to begin with. And of course, you're going to need a stable, strong internet connection. Most of you have that because you're used to Zoom and home internet works just fine. But be aware that tethering is going to be a little bit more challenging if you want help or you want to share your screen or what have you. It's important to note that no work can be stored on the remote desktop or the virtual machine, because if the machine restarts, you're going to lose your work. Or if it times out, there's a time limit on how long you can work on the machine. If you're not actively working, it'll kick you out. If that happens, if you have something saved, say on the desktop, you won't have it anymore, because when you log back in, you'll probably get a different machine. So it's important to make sure you're backing up your work. We will use the Microsoft OneDrive quite extensively in this class to sync your work to and from the school computer, the remote desktop. So we use that a lot. The good news is you all have a OneDrive account through school. So I think they give you, it's either, I think it's a minimum of 25 gigs. It might be 100 gigs of space. And that'll get you through the semester without a problem. Make sure you're safeguarding your files. If you come to me because you've lost a particular file, you know, it crashed, or your computer, you spilled coffee on your computer, whatever, it's not my fault. So make sure you're backing up your files. It's really important to keep good backups so that you don't lose your work going forward. Let's see. Hold on. I'm seeing in chat that I have a couple questions. Let me check on those really quick and just see if there's anything. Oh, Brooke's telling me that Creation Engine has Rhino for 139. So that's even better. So thank you, Brooke, for telling me that. Okay, let's see here. If I can make the chat go away. Now, of course, I'm not going to be able to make the chat go away. Hold on. All right, let's get back to it. Sorry. Okay, the all-important grading question. So how do I get grades in this class? There is no official midterm or final test for this class, which is awesome. Your grade is going to be based on 4 things: 20% for your lab exercises, 40% for your assignments, 30% for your final project, and 10% for your participation. I'll talk about what each of these are in much more depth coming up, but the key thing here is that it has a very consistent workload. So if you're taking this class at the same time you're taking 220, for example, or you're taking 121 or one of the other architecture studio classes, this is a good pairing, because it's not meant to have the big spikes where there's lots of work. It's kind of a consistent level of work. When we start working on your final project, we do a lot of the work in class or during the lab time. So as long as you're putting in the time each week, you shouldn't feel overwhelmed with some big project. It's designed to kind of be a consistent set level of work. So let's talk about the lab exercises. Lab exercises are worth 20% of your overall grade. They're supposed to be completed in about 2 hours. And they're really focused on building fundamental skills. So I'm going to have a particular, especially in the beginning with Rhino, I'm going to have a very particular set of structure for you to follow. I'll have it all will be written up. You'll learn that particular set of skills, and then you'll turn that in. Then we'll work on the next set of skills. Now, each time we do this, it builds. So there's always a next level of skill that's based on the skill that you learned before. So it'd be pretty hard to say to miss a week and then jump back in and be able to keep going. You're going to have to go back and make up that time before you really get caught up. So it's important that skills build on themselves. Exercises are going to be due at the end of the week that they're assigned. So for example, this week, we're going to have exercise 201 and 202, and they'll be due on Sunday night, which is the 30th of January at midnight. So that's kind of the trajectory. There's always going to be 2 per week, unless it's a holiday weekend like President's Week or something like that. You're always going to have 2, and then they're going to be due on that Sunday at midnight. I would say the best strategy is to try to stay on the Monday, Wednesday schedule. You do the work on Monday after we're done. You do the work on Wednesday after we're done. You turn it in, and then you're on time and moving forward. The biggest risk in a online virtual class is that you get behind and then trying to catch up. It's a really long process. It doesn't mean you can't do it. I've had plenty of students who get behind and get caught up, but if you stay on top of it, you're going to be far better off in the learning process. The other thing that's important to note about these lab exercises is that they have a pass, not pass grading system. So you're going to work for 2 hours, and however far you get, that's what you're going to turn in. I'm not asking you to spend hours and hours and hours outside of class on these lab exercises. I want you to spend about 2 hours, and then I want you to turn it in. The other thing is, if something doesn't quite turn out, or you try something and it doesn't quite look right, that's okay. That's the point of doing a lab exercise. You're trying to learn the skills, and if it doesn't quite turn out right, that's okay. So it's a pass, not pass. You either get 100% because you did it, or you get a 0 because you didn't. Assignments, on the other hand, tend to be larger, and they're going to require additional work outside of those work times, the 2 hours each day. They're going to be graded based on the skills that you're using. That's what you learn in the lab exercises, but also your overall design. If we look at the first project, you're going to be designing a table and a chair. So I'm looking at what skills are you using? How are you applying texture maps? How did you go about building this particular chair or table? Did you use a sweep? Those kinds of skills. But I'm also looking at, what does the chair look like? Is it a beautiful, elegant chair? Is it meant to be a chunky, heavy chair? What is your intent there? And how well did you execute that intent? So it's graded based on the skills used and that overall design piece. The assignments collectively, if we take them all together, will be worth about 40% of your grade. There will be probably 4 assignments, so they're about 10% each for your grade. Now, the nice thing, and this is really important, and it depends on which class you're in and which professor you have. And in my world, I would rather have you push the boundaries of what I'm asking for. Do something a little bit out there, lean over the cliff, so to speak. And don't be afraid that you're going to get a bad grade, because you may get a bad grade, but you always are able to do a regrade or a resubmit on any assignment. So if you did something, you took a risk, it didn't really turn out the way you wanted, you turned it in, you got a grade and you got a C, you can do a fresh regrade. You can do it over again and turn it in, and I'll grade it as if I never saw your first one. So it's not based on improvement. It's just like the first one didn't exist and we do it again. That being said, it's only fair that your grade could go up or go down. So if you did a worse job on the second one, your grade theoretically could go down. I don't know that that's ever happened, but I like to point that out. All regrades will occur at the end of the semester, though you can post them at any point. So you do assignment 201, you didn't like what happened, you got a C, you want to redo it, you submit it, that's great, but I'm not going to go back and process the regrade until the end of the semester. And that's because you only get 1 for each assignment. You can't go back and keep regrading and regrading and regrading. Okay? Course participation. So this is the other half. We talked about attendance and being in the mandatory check-ins. But the other part is that after many of the exercises and every assignment, I'm going to ask you to give constructive feedback to 3 of your fellow students. And this is important in 2 ways. Number 1, it's important because then you get feedback on your work. So somebody's going to be commenting on your work and tell you what's working and what's not working. But the other half of this is actually designed for you when you go and write the comments to learn how to articulate what is really good about a particular piece of design and what's not so good about a piece of design. And that articulation and that design conversation is something that you need to practice and you need to get better at. And I'm not asking you to say, oh, I really like your rendering, it's pretty. Or, wow, that's so beautiful. Those are not constructive, helpful comments. When you talk about constructive, helpful comments, you might say, hey, I noticed on your chair that the legs feel a little bit thick compared to the rest of the chair. I think if you made them more thin, the chair might become more elegant, which I believe is your intent. That's constructive, helpful feedback. And that's what we're after as part of these comments. So spend time. These should take about 10 minutes when you write your 3, and spend the time to do a good job actually articulating what's working for somebody or what's not working for somebody. So that's the other half of your participation grade for this course. That'll be 5%. The attendance is 5%. Together, they become 10% of your overall grade. We talked about attendance already. Your mandatory check-in is mandatory. You need to make sure that you're showing up, but that's only 30 minutes. For each of these, remember, we're going to have 2 lab exercises per week. They're each about 2 hours. So you're going to have 4 hours of working on these lab exercises, and you have 30 minutes that you have to check in with me. Now, during that 30 minutes, you can, of course, be working on that 2 hours or that 4 hours worth of work, but you need to kind of keep track of that and make sure you're putting in the time. If you add together the 2 hours and the 1 hour lecture twice a week, you end up with a total of about 6 hours and 10 minutes of actual work for this class per week. And sometimes there's additional work, there's homework, there's the assignment that you have to be working on your table and chair, for example. Those are things that will add to this, but you need to make sure that you're setting aside this time and actually putting in the time. You're not going to be able to, I mean, in the beginning, yes, maybe you can get away with not the full, 2 hours and a lab exercise, but there will come a point in the semester where they really do take 2 hours. And if you only have 30 minutes, you're not going to get enough out of the lab exercise. You're not going to be prepared to be able to do the actual assignment down the road. If you don't complete the assignments, no surprise, you're either going to be dropped or you're probably going to receive an F in the class. I like to just throw that out there so you're aware. And the other thing that this is really important is that this is a college class and you're responsible for your own destiny in this class. So I don't like to kick people out of class. I really don't. I give them the benefit of the doubt. When it comes to that withdraw date, if you say, no, I think I can make it and I want in, I'm all for it. I would rather have you stay in. I'd rather have you do well. I'm rooting for you. However, when it gets to that point and you're saying, yeah, I've missed too many classes or I'm too far behind and I don't think I can get there, go ahead and take yourself out of the class. Don't just sit there and wait for me to kick you out, because I don't like to do that. So if you don't feel like you're doing well, go ahead and take yourself out of the class. A few additional guidelines for the course. The assignment due dates are going to be announced in class. Actually, for this class, you guys won't have an assignment for quite a while. I don't think the first one happens until like a month in, because we have to start from the basics. We've got to build up your skills before you can really do anything. That being said, most of the early exercises actually won't have comments attached with them. I'm not here to waste your time. I want things to be productive. So when we get to that assignment, it's going to be due on midnight of whatever day I say it's due. That day isn't necessarily a Sunday like the exercises. It could be a Wednesday, it could be a Friday, it could be a different day that it's due. So we'll make sure that you know that. It'll be written all over the place and you'll get emails from me reminding you. But I just like to make sure that you're aware of that. Exercises are due on Sunday at midnight. No surprise, we already talked about that. And all work that's completed in this course is going to be posted to the course website under a Creative Commons license. You can look that up if you want specifics on it, but it essentially allows us to all work together and collaborate without getting hung up on copyright issues. You're not creating spectacular work that needs to be copywritten. We're learning. That's what we're here for. And that's what's really important. If you want to talk more about that, we can talk during office hours. But I like to put that out there so you know. During these check-ins, obviously I'm going to be there working with individual students, working with you guys as a small group. That's only 30 minutes. There's a lot of time outside of that that you're going to be working and chewing on the class. I try to make things as available as possible. I have video tutorials. I record the lectures. I have written write-ups on how certain things work. Look at all of those, take notes, think about how you might to accomplish what it is that we're doing. But don't forget your other classmates may have similar questions or may need help, or you might be able to help your friend. They might be able to help you. So talk to your friends too. I do suggest you take notes while I'm doing the live demonstrations. It's pretty hard to actually, I mean, maybe with a tool monitor setup you could do it, but it's pretty hard to actually do what I'm doing in the lecture and then while I'm doing it, and you end up losing steps. So I'd rather have you kind of listen and then go back and do it. One of the advantages there is that since I record all the lectures, I have previously recorded lectures. You can use those if my new one's not up yet. But you can use those recorded lectures as a guide later on. You can work a little bit, pause, come back, work a little bit more, pause, etc. So it can kind of help you through, and that's why I post them like that. YouTube.com/digital tools for Arch will be where all the videos will be posted. Your class 136 is always going to be in the 200s. So the lectures are 201, 202, 203, exercises 201, 202. You get the idea. So you're looking for the 200s. My 135 class, everything's in the 100s. So that's an easy way of keeping things separate. So you can always tell what what you're doing in this particular class. Late work policy, essentially for every 4 days, 4 calendar days that something is late, doesn't matter the day of the week, it's just every 4 calendar days, I'm going to drop you by 10%. So if you turned in something, if the project was worthy of an A, but you turned it in 4 days late, you're going to drop by 1 whole letter grade, it'll be a B. If we go past 16 calendar days, max value is going to be 50%. If you don't turn it in at all, it's going to be a 0, which is no good. That does not help your grade at all. So it's really better to turn something in that's not fully finished or isn't quite the way you want it than it is to wait and be late. And I do this on purpose because in life, in the real world, let's say you have an architecture project that you're presenting in front of a design review commission or a planning commission. There's a hard deadline for when you have to turn in your work in order to be on the agenda. Maybe it's, in order to be on the agenda for Friday, you have to turn it in by Monday at 4 p.m. Well, that's a hard deadline. If you miss that deadline, you're not on the agenda, you don't present. So it's really important that you learn to respect these deadlines and make sure you make the deadlines rather than be late. So my late work policy is punitive on purpose. So just turn it in on time. So I think from here on out, I'm going to show you some different examples of things that are done in Rhino. We're going to work through kind of student work and examples. A lot of these are the renderings that occur at the end. So you can get kind of a sense. Some of them have more post-processing in Photoshop or whatever. And so I'm just going to flip through these. We don't have to spend a lot of time. Everybody always likes the night renderings or the sunset renderings. So, but this is where we end up going toward the end of the semester. So it's going to take a while to get there. And I think that might be it, but we love how things pop up at the wrong times. Is that it? Yep, that's it. Okay, so at this point, we're going to, if I can get out of, oh, no, never mind, we're still going. There's the last one. At this point, I'm going to shift. We've done kind of the introductory lecture. Now I'm going to shift and I'm going to talk about where we're going from here. So first off, this is the course website. If you've been in my class before, you already have a login. You're going to use the same account that you used previously. If you haven't been in one of my classes before, you should have gotten an email yesterday with login information so that you could log in for the first time. Many of you have already logged in. Some of you have already changed your password. When you go to log in, you'll click on this little login button right here. It'll take you to this login screen. You'll type in your username, which is usually based on your Insight ID, and then you'll type in your password. Initially, you might be copying and pasting the password, but once you're in, I'm already logged in. You'll see that on the home page, there's the black bar that goes across the top. So when that black bar is there, you're logged in. And we can actually go from the main page here into your dashboard. So this is kind of behind the scenes. We'll come back to the main website itself. And in your dashboard, if you come down here to profile on the left side, and we click on that, there we go. You can actually scroll down and there's a place where you can set a new password. So you can click on the set a password button and we could type in, password 1234, for example. Now, of course, that's a terrible password. If you were in my 135 class, you know that I can't stand to use a terrible password like that. And actually on the website, you would have to check this box to say, yes, go ahead and use a weak password. So it's really forcing you to try to have a better password installed. So hopefully you've set a nice password. Once you're done, you can click on update profile and now you have a fresh password in your account. I'm going to go back to the main site. So I'll come up here in the left corner and click on visit site. That'll take us back to the front. And let me walk you through what's going on this course website. So first off, under about, under this first tab, if we come down here to 136, we could go to the course syllabus. And this is all the course syllabus information that we basically just went through. I also have the ability to actually click and download a PDF version of it, should you want a PDF version. So it's all there. If we move over into the next section, we have lectures. So this is where the lectures are going to be posted. So right here under Digital Tools for Architects, we can go to spring of 2022. And this is where our lectures are going to be posted. The one for today is lecture 201. So if I were to click on that, it'll take us to lecture 201. Now, I haven't uploaded this recording because obviously it's still recording, but it would show up here as a YouTube video. So you'd be able to watch that. There'll be a link to the YouTube video there. The other thing that I have down here is I have the ability to download the slides. So the slides that I just showed, if you want to print them or look at them or whatever afterward, they're all there as PDFs. There's one with 4 per page and there's one just the regular set of slides. So that's there should you want it and should you need it. And like I said, I'll update this recording as soon as it's done. That brings us to a good point, and that is that unfortunately, I'm going to be out of town on Wednesday. So we're not having a live lecture on Wednesday. We'll resume the live lectures next Monday, the 31st. But oops, sorry, wrong class here. We're going to go right there. But we're going to work today on 201, the second half, and exercise 201. But I would like for you to watch lecture 202, which is posted right here. And so if we were to click on that, you'll see that the video is actually up. It's a pre-recording from last semester. Of course, everything's loading a little bit slow right now, but it's there. I'd ask that you watch that and then complete exercise 202 as well. We'll get to the exercise in a second. So that'll be on your own. If you struggle with it, you can hold off and we can talk next week during our check-ins and I can help you directly with it. So there's no harm in waiting. I'd like you to try to do that though, so we can stay on track over the course of the semester. And again, I apologize for being gone on Wednesday, but that's the way things fall sometimes. Next piece on the course website here is the tutorials section. These are really important. They're step-by-step walkthroughs. So if we came down here to Rhino and we looked at Rhino 5.2, for example, this is the simple shapes part. There it is. This is actually what we're going to be doing today in class. So I'm going to walk you through this, but you can go back and you can view this. These are all of the various tools. You can see that I have the icons so you know what to pick, etc. So we'll go through step by step. You can download that if you want, but it's also here on the course website. So there'll be lots of other tutorials. You can see that there's all kinds of them here. If we go to V-Ray, for example, there's all kinds there. So you're going to be using those a lot, and they tend to be cross-linked in the course. So next up is exercises. This is where your exercises live. We'll go to spring of 2022. And we have exercise 201 and exercise 202. Exercise 201 is what we're going to be working on today. And there it is. And I'll walk you through this in just a little bit. Beyond that, we have assignments. There haven't been any assigned yet, so you're not going to see anything there just yet. Resources, these are things that can help you. There's Rhino blocks, there's V-Ray, quick rendering setups, and whatever. We'll be using those extensively in the course. Nothing to worry about just yet, but they're there. We also have student work. So you could come down here and you could see, for example, what somebody did on exercise 201. I'm opening it in a new tab because we'll keep 201 open. But these are all posts that students have made from exercise 201 from previous semesters. So you can see them all there. This is the little shape that we're going to be making in just a bit. So that shows you the student work. So we've made it to the point where we've kind of gone through the website. I'll come back to it when we make our first post. And I know I'm going to end up going a little bit long today by the time I go through and do this demo. But what I want to share with you now is the connection to the remote desktop system. So in order to get into the remote desktop system, we're going to type in the web address idm.dvc.edu. And that's going to allow us to get to the remote desktop page. Now, if you haven't already logged in, I've already logged in, it's going to take you to the standard login screen that you're used to seeing when you log into Insight or Canvas or whatever. You'll log in, and then it'll take you to this screen. Now, if you've never actually used the remote desktop at DVC, the first time I recommend installing the desktop client. So in order to do that, I would come up here to my initials, and I go into my account. And from there, you're going to see that we have the ability to install the client, or we could work in our browser mode. So you could click on browser. That's going to launch the remote desktop in the browser. This is going to launch it in the client. If you don't have the client installed, you need to click this little install link, and it'll let you download and install the client for your use. I already have that downloaded and installed. It's checked, so by default, it will open in the client when I go to open this. So I'm going to go back to favorites. No, it doesn't look like I have anything there. Let me go to apps, and I should see, and you should see, ET Lab 01. And so if I click on this ET Lab 01, it's going to actually give me a computer from the engineering technology labs that I can use. So it's connecting right now. We'll give it a little bit of time to connect. While that's happening, I'm going to look at my chat questions here. Let's see. First question. Yes, Rudy, if you already have a login from 135, you use the same login. Looks like one of you is having trouble accessing this idm.dvc. We'll have to look at that. I'm not sure what the problem is. We'll see if the rest of you have that similar problem. So once it opens up, this is the remote desktop client. So what we're seeing, and it essentially looks like a computer screen. The access is remote, but this is actually a live computer that's at DVC that's working. Now, when I first log in, you'll see this little pop-up that shows up here. And that is that, please note, after 30 minutes of inactivity, they're going to kick you out. I've requested that 30 minutes be changed to be a little bit longer. They seem to not want to do it, but I have a workaround, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the semester for how you can extend how long that works when you leave. But it's something to be aware of, that they're trying to release the computers to other people so that you're not just sitting there with a connection that's wide open. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And what I have here is I have a standard desktop computer. Right here is our Rhino 7. That's what we're going to be using to do our modeling today. But in order to work on this remote desktop, we need a way of connecting our files. And you can actually browse and connect to your computer directly if you're using the client. If you come down here into network, you can actually, you're supposed to be able to connect to your home computer. I don't use that method. I don't think it works particularly well. So instead, what I recommend is that you log in to OneDrive. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to look for a little cloud icon that has a slash in it. And you can see that it's listed as OneDrive, but it's not connected. So if I click on that connection, it's going to pop up the OneDrive and allow me to sign in. So I'll click on sign in. and it'll bring it up, and I need to type in my Insight email address. So mine's a little bit different than yours because I'm faculty and you're students. So for me is gadams407 at email.4cd.edu. Yours would be your regular login with your 3 numbers at insight.4cd.edu. So it's just slightly different, but that's because I'm faculty. I'll go ahead and click on sign in. And it's going to ask, actually, yours might not ask. For me, it always asks whether it's work or school. It is. And it will then present me with my login screen. So I need to copy my password. So bear with me for a second. And of course, it's not opening right now. Come on. All right, let me get that password in. There we go. All right, so the folder location's fine. We'll stick with the same folder location. I'll say next. And then it brings up this, do you want to back up your desktop and documents folder? No, absolutely, I do not want to back those up. So we'll uncheck all 3 of those and click skip. And that's fine. We basically click our way through the rest of this. Perfect, OneDrive is ready. And it will then start to download the information that's in my OneDrive account. And so if you've never worked using your OneDrive, most of this wouldn't show up. This is all stuff that's pre-existing in my OneDrive account. But what I save here will show up on my home computer if I've logged into OneDrive, but it'll also be backed up in the cloud, which is a great way of protecting your files. So when it comes to the exercise for today, if I bounce back to Chrome here and we look at it, here is my exercise 201. And we're going to actually create this shape. So I'm going to walk you through creating that. First thing I ask you is to download this exercise 201 3DM file. So if I right click on it and I say save link as, it's going to pop up and ask me where to save it. And so I could save it just to my downloads folder, but if I want it to sync via OneDrive, I really should put it in my OneDrive folder. So I already have connected OneDrive to my Mac in addition to the remote desktop. So if I were to put it here, for example, and click save, it will then sync through OneDrive and it'll show up on the remote desktop. Now, this is something that Chrome started to do, is that when you download things like 3DMs, it'll say exercise 201 can't be downloaded securely. And instead of clicking discard, click that little up arrow and choose keep. And then it will download. That's a security setting in Chrome that's going to cause problems, but it's there. So at this point, I can switch back into my remote desktop. There it is. And I just saved it into my OneDrive folder. So if I were to open up OneDrive here, and let me open the folder, it should show up here. I think it's still syncing, which is why I don't have it yet. Let me check. Yep, on my computer, it's still syncing. So got to give it a second. This is what always happens when you do things live, is you end up with problems like this. So the other alternative would be to open it. Nope, still processing. You could open the website on the school computer. So I can open this up and I could go to Digital Tools for Architects. And I could go tier 2 exercises. We could go to today. And I can download this file. So let me save link as, and it should be here in OneDrive. So we'll try to, oh, it just showed up. Look at that. So it just takes a little bit of time. There it is right there, exercise 201. And now I can go ahead and open it. So I didn't end up having to download it again. So that's good. It's syncing back and forth. So if I double click this exercise 201 file, it's going to open up Rhino. And so this will take a second. So we'll let it do its thing. Okay, so Rhino's open, and by default, all of these toolbars show up. And unfortunately, when they were setting up these remote desktop machines, they never configured everything properly. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll take my V-Ray All toolbar, and I'm going to drag it from that blue bar just so that it docks up here in the top. And then I can close the rest of these because we're not going to use those. So we'll close those. The V-Ray All gives us plenty of information. And what I was able to do, and the reason that I had you download that file and start from there, is that I already have some lighting conditions set up. So when you go to render, it'll be ready for you. So there's this thing called an infinite plane here in our 3D view that will help the rendering ahead of time. If you don't, and you start from a fresh Rhino file, you'll still be just fine with what we're trying to create today. So now that I have this set up, we're going to follow that tutorial right here to create this shape. So here's the tutorial. And one of the things that's helpful, especially if you have two monitors, is you can kind of bring these up and work with them. I'm not going to worry too much about the tutorial. I'll just do it, but you'll want to flip back and forth because it'll help you kind of sort out the order here of what you're trying to do. So let me pull that out of the way for us. There we go. And so what we're going to do here is we've created this file. I want to walk you first through kind of how Rhino is set up, what we're seeing here, what the view looks like. So at the top, we have our standard menu structure, file, edit, etc. But we also have things in there like curve and surface, solid. Those are all three-dimensional modeling techniques. We have transform. So all of the commands in Rhino can be accessed by three different methods. One is to use the menu structure up here. Two would be to pick the corresponding button to do what it is we want to do. Or third would be to enter the command in the command line. So up here, you see a little bit of text and it says command colon. At any point, you can actually type something in here and create a particular command, initiate a particular command. So it's good to get used to that. The faster people work, the more they'll use the command line. But I will, in my demonstrations, switch back and forth between the variety of methods used to create it. So we're going to start first by creating a rectangle. So we're going to use this rectangle tool. And when I click on this rectangle tool, it's going to ask me for the first corner of my rectangle. So I have four different views that I can draw in. I have a top view, I have a front view, I have a right side view, and I have a perspective view. For our purposes today, we're going to work in this perspective view, and we're going to draw in the perspective view. Now, if I were to start drawing in this perspective view, when I start, it's going to show up in the other views as well. So let me start in perspective. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here at the origin. So right here at 0, 0. And in order to get exactly on that point, I'm going to go ahead and type in 0, 0. And when I type in that 0, 0, it will start right there at my origin. I can then, if I know my second point, I could say that I want it to be 5 feet, 5 feet. Now, if these coordinates aren't making that much sense to you, it's okay. We're going to spend all next class exercise 202 and lecture 202 talking about these coordinates and drawing in 2 dimensions. So trust me when I say these values will go in more detail in exercise 202. And so if we look up here at the command line, you see that I've typed in 5 feet, comma, 5 feet. I can go ahead and hit enter at that point on my keyboard. On the Mac, sometimes it says return, just FYI. And that's then created this shape, which is fundamentally just a square. If I highlight that shape, it'll highlight in yellow. So if I click on it, so if I click off and select nothing, and then I come over here and click on the shape, I will get that yellow shape right there. Now, with that selected as yellow, I'm going to perform what's called a patch command. And I can do that by either going up to surface and then choosing patch, which is right here, or I could actually type patch into the command line. So there it is as patch, and I'll go ahead and hit enter. That brings up the patch surface options dialog box here. And the only thing, we could go with it the way it is, but we're going to change the U spans and the V spans to be 2. So I put 2 in each of those 2 fields, and I'll go ahead and say, okay, if you leave them at 10, it's not going to hurt anything for them to still be at 10. And that then creates a surface, and we can tell the surface because it has this little cross pattern on it. That creates a surface where I used to just have a line. So now I have a square surface. Next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rectangular plane corner to corner tool, which is over here. It's hidden underneath this tool right here. So if I click on it, see that little arrow next to it? I'll click on that, and I'll come down here and I'll choose the rectangular plane corner to corner. So this tool right there. Alternatively, I could come up to surface and I could go to, let's see, where is it? You can tell that I don't do this very often from its menu structure. Oh, surface, and then plane, corner to corner. And when I look at my options here, it says first corner of plane, or I could choose to have a vertical plane. So in this case, let's use a vertical plane. It's going to ask me for the start of the edge. And so I'll click right here. Now, I can't be right on that edge. I'm not snapping right to that point. So I'm going to come down here in the lower section, and I'm going to see a bunch of little check boxes. So down in the lower right corner, I have the ability to check end, for example, mid. I could also check perpendicular. Those are the 3 that I tend to leave on at all times. These are called snaps. And when those are turned on, when I move over my object, it's going to snap to the corner, and I'll get a little icon that says end. And when I do that, I can actually click on that end, and then I can come along this edge and I can click on that end. So that gives me the base for this surface. And now I just need to type in the height. So I can type in 5 feet, and that's 5 apostrophe, and I'll press enter. And once I do that, it's going to ask me to choose the rectangle. And that basically means, do I want the one that goes down or the one that goes up? So I just have to make one more click with my mouse, and I create that surface. So I'm going to do the same thing along this surface. So I'm going to repeat myself here. I'm going to come over to my surface tools. I'm going to choose the rectangular plane, corner to corner. And I'm going to choose vertical. And I will click on the first point and click on that point. And then this time I could type in 5 feet, or I could actually snap to the height of my other rectangle. So now I have this surface, and this surface. So we're starting to get somewhere. Now, what I just did is I did something called an orbit, because I wanted to look around at this object. And the way that I do that is I hold down the right click. So if I click and hold down the right click button, I can actually orbit around. And when I let go, I'll stop. The other thing that I can do is, if I don't want to see the rest of these views, I can actually double click right here where it says perspective. And I can make that take up the whole size. which gives me a little bit more space to work. And now we can see that kind of in 3 dimensions. Okay, so we're going to continue on here. I'm just checking to see if anybody had any questions. Okay, good. We're going to continue on, and I'm going to use the polyline tool, which is this tool right here. It would also be available under the curve menu under polyline. And I'm going to draw a line that goes from this corner diagonally across to that corner. Now, the way polyline works is it continues drawing lines until I'm done. And to be done, I need to press the Enter or Return key on the keyboard to end the command. So now I have just that diagonal line that goes across. So I want to fill in this top with a surface, because right now it's just a line. So to fill it in, I will use this surface from 3 or 4 corner points. And I'm going to pick the 3 corner points. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. There isn't a 4th, so it's asking me for a 4th, but I don't have one. So I'll go ahead and press Enter, and you'll see that it'll create this surface that's on top. So if I were to orbit around, we can start to see that shape that I just made. So I have 4 total surfaces: 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so once I have those surfaces, we're going to create, now let me make sure I'm doing this in the correct order. Yes, good. We're going to create 2 lines. I have the line that's right there, but I'd like to create a line that goes right there. So I can go back to the polyline tool and I can draw a line from here to there. I'll hit Enter to finish. The other alternative, if I didn't want to do it that way, is that I could use what's called derivative geometry. I could say, you know what, I have a surface here and I want the edge of this surface to be a line. I can do that by going up to my surface, and then I could choose curve from objects. Oh, excuse me, it's under curve from objects. There it is. And I want to duplicate an edge, in which case I could pick just that edge. It's kind of an advanced concept. We'll cover it more in depth later, but I like to point it out early. So I've created that line. Now, if you're trying to select it and you see a little pop-up menu show up, this is something that Rhino does that's really powerful. And that is that if you're clicking on a spot that has more than one object in it, it'll let you kind of scroll between the various objects so you can pick which one you want. So I have the surface, I have the curve that I started with, or I have the single curve. So let's pick that one, and it highlights in yellow. I'm going to hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and choose that line right there. And when I have those 2 lines selected, I'm going to go up to Surface, and I'm going to choose Loft. It's the second option down here. The default options here are fine. We'll go ahead and say OK. And you'll see that I now created a twisting surface right there. It's called a ruled surface. So I need to finish off my shape and create one more surface. It's just 3 points, so I can use this surface from 3 or 4 corner points. And I can choose 1, 2, and 3. I'll hit Enter when I'm done. And that then creates this triangle as well. So I now have a completely enclosed shape. So at this point, it's probably a good idea to save my work. So I'll go up to File and then choose Save. We want to make sure that it ends up in my OneDrive account. So we'll go to OneDrive. And this is where organization would probably be a good idea. So I'm going to go into live demonstrations here. Your orders will be a little bit different. Here's my basic shapes. Let me create a new folder for spring of 2022. And we'll save it right there, exercise 201, and I'll click Save. Okay, so now that it's saved, looks like it's still working on saving, but now that it's saved, This is really the extent that is required for our work today. So at this point, I can create a capture or take a screenshot, and that would be sufficient for turning in work. For the fun of it, I'm going to let you guys do a little bit of rendering should you decide to. If I just wanted to take a screenshot, I can go to where it says perspective. I can click that down arrow, and I can choose capture to file, and that'll save a screenshot of what I see on the screen. And so we could say, okay, and then it could go into my OneDrive. And I could save that capture. So that's just basically a screenshot. Or we could actually render this out a little bit. So to render it out, I'm going to go up to the render menu. I'm going to choose current renderer, and I'm going to change from Rhino render to V-Ray. So that's render, current renderer, V-Ray. And then let's just see what happens. I'll come up here to my V-Ray toolbars, and I'll click on this little teapot icon. And so it's going to render out my object. Oh, of course, it's dark. I need to reset an option here. So let me go into my V-Ray asset editor, which is the first button. It looks like kind of a sphere. And when I go to that, I'm going to click on my settings, this little gear icon. And let me revert to default render settings. So there's a little circle here. We'll revert to those settings. And then let's click on the teapot and see what happens. There we go. So it's rendering out. We can see my shape. It's red because the material that is on this layer is currently red, but we can actually assign a completely different material. So this one's red. I could save it by clicking this little disk icon, and this saves a JPEG. So once again, I'm in OneDrive, and let's go into today's folder. And I could say this is render for exercise 201. Let's save it as a JPEG, not a PNG. The PNG won't preserve a background. It'll be transparent. Okay, but if I wanted to change the material, and again, this is totally optional at this point, there's actually a bunch of materials that are available inside of V-Ray. So in this V-Ray asset editor, this first button right here, if I click this little drawer, this little arrow on the left side here, I can download all the V-Ray materials. And unfortunately, when they set up these computers, they didn't pre-download the materials. So we actually have to wait to download those materials. So we can download those. Takes a minute or two. All right, so all the materials have now been applied, or they're here. So I could pick any one of a number of materials. So there's metals, for example. So if I wanted to use this aluminum, what I would need to do is to select my object. So I'm dragging a box around the object. and then I want to apply this material to it, I can right click on the material and say apply to selection. And then when I come back to the little teapot and I render this time, my new material has been applied. So again, these are all optional steps. Once we get to the rendering, all you need to do is to do the basic capture. But I like to kind of point that out as part of the workflow going down the road. So once you have this and you have it saved, it's now time to post it on the website. Those of you that have been in class with me before, the website, you're used to it. It's pretty easy. I'm actually going to pull back up the one on my home computer, not on the remote desktop, because I'm already logged in here. And when I'm on the course website, I'm going to go up to this black bar across the top. I'm going to click on the new button and choose new post. And once I have the new post available, I'm going to go ahead and type exercise 201. It would help if I could spell correctly. Let's try that one more time. And it won't let me post anything because I have no featured image. So over here, I'm going to scroll all the way down to the right side. At the very bottom is a set featured image. We'll go to upload files. I'll click on select files. Now I saved these in my OneDrive folder, so I can come back to my OneDrive folder. We can look at my live demonstrations. And I can come here to my first one. There it is. And I can choose either of the JPEGs, either the screenshot or the rendering. I can click open. It'll upload that. And once it's done that, I can click on, oops, sorry, the set featured image. All right, now I have the featured image. The last piece would be to categorize this correctly. This is exercise 201. It's exercise 201, not assignment 201. So make sure you're picking exercise 201, and then I can click on publish. And that's essentially like turning in your work. So I don't need the Rhino file. All I need is the actual JPEG of what you've done. That's the proof that you worked through this process. So I'm going to let you guys all work. I will stay on Zoom today and help any of you with any issues as you go forward. You may want to pull up the video from last semester, and so you can watch it. It's kind of step by step as I go through that process of creating that first shape. Remember that we're not having a live lecture on Wednesday. We'll come back to the live lecture next Monday, the 31st. Also, by that point, I will send you an email with your check-in time slot. Thank you to all of you who have already sent me emails with your requests. Please do that. Make sure I get the requests. And then it'll probably be this coming weekend that I'll send you out what time slot you get. Because like I said, I'll be out of town, so I won't be able to do it. And then we'll hit the ground running next Monday. So I'm going to stick around. If any of you have questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, you're free to go at this point.